Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast, a show at the intersection of technology and strategy. On this show, we interview industry leaders and experts to better understand how they think about strategy during this time of exponential progress.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Point of No Return podcast. I'm very happy today to bring to you Anna Chif, co-founder and COO at Dialogue. I've been harassing Anna for a few months, so I'm really happy that she took the time out of her very busy schedule to come and chat about her role at Dialogue, what she founded. And she's really, truly a remarkable entrepreneur. And we dig into it quite a bit. We spoke a lot about, obviously, what she's doing at Dialogue. And some of the key insights there for me was about really, truly being mission-driven and seeing and understanding what they're trying to do in the healthcare space. We spoke a lot about the market and where it's headed, and it's very interesting to see how early days it is and some of the very promising potential that Dialogue has in particular in their space, but in the industry as a whole. We spoke about Anna's career and what led her to starting Dialogue, her background in wellness, her background also in consulting, which was interesting. And then finally, we spoke about what she's excited about, some of the key technologies, some of the key trends of healthcare, and in particular in mental health, that I find very personally interesting to me as someone that's been touched by it. So that's it. I won't keep you more with this intro. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's one of my favorites that I've had. I hope that you enjoy the show. Anna, thank you for being on the show today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Finally, you found the time. So I'm really happy that you took the time out of a hyper growth startup to come and be on the podcast.
It's a pleasure.
And before, I know we're going to talk about all things tech and all things startup related around Dialogue, but I do have one question I'm curious about to start with is why an interest in cuisine and nutrition?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I've always been passionate about health and wellness and nutrition. It's something I've read about. When I was a kid, I would spend all my money on food, and my mom couldn't believe why all my pocket money went there instead of saving or something a little bit more impactful. So out of school, I worked at a company called McKinsey. And when I left, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And my first attempt at addressing the health and wellness space was through food. I've seen family members and just the population generally eating unhealthy. And there's just so much that can be done in the food space to make people healthier and happier. So that was my first attempt. That was my first attempt at being an entrepreneur. That's where I learned all my rookie mistakes, and hired and fired my first employees. And also realized that I didn't love working with fresh food. And my second attempt at working in the health and wellness space was Dialogue, and I still wake up, energized and happy to do it. I still love to eat. I still have a very particular diet, vegetarian diet, but that was kind of the food transition from corporate to being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's interesting. And of course, anytime we talk about food, me personally, I can go on forever. In my upbringing, in my culture, being Greek, it's like that's all we ever worried about at home was food, and is there enough food on the table? So yeah. I don't want to go too deep on the food sector, but you mentioned you're a vegetarian, so I'm curious what led you to. Imagine you weren't born a vegetarian, or was it something you were brought up with, or was it a decision you made later on in life?
No, so actually I was, I'm of Russian background. So as you can imagine, having enough food on the table is also part of our, big concerns in life. And we eat a lot of meat and potato in my culture. And, so I used to be a big carnivore growing up. And, actually my mother was the first one to go vegetarian. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's crazy. Like, how can you do this to yourself? Meat is so good. And I did a 10-day retreat where we had to do a strictly raw vegan diet. And I have never felt so good in my life than after that retreat. And I have never felt the need to eat meat afterwards. So for about 7 years, I stopped eating meat. I cut out meat. And then I started scuba diving, and I saw the underworld and didn't feel like eating fish anymore. And then I started working at McKinsey, and I worked with a vegan, and in late evenings, we had debates about how ethical or not is it to consume dairy and eggs. And after that project, I decided to give it a try. And so I was vegan for about 5 years. And then when I got pregnant, I decided to reintroduce some animal produce. But that was the journey. So it was, I would say, over the last 12 years that I've been kind of cutting out meat, vegan, vegetarian, and so on.
Interesting. Do you plan to go back to vegan? Is that something you're considering, or for the time being, given your young daughter, you're not keeping that as an option? Yeah,
for now, it's I want to leave it a little bit more open. I think I was very, very strict on being vegan, and I think it's just easier to be flexible. I still don't eat meat just because I have no desire for it. I don't eat very much fish, but when I go out and there's a choice between something super high in carbs, like a risotto, which is the only vegetarian option, and, a piece of fish with vegetables, that's where I would choose the fish. So I'm kind of just still testing where
my stuff you're experimenting with, like intermittent fasting or anything else.
I've tried, honestly, so much of it. I've done water fasting for 5 days in a row, and, have my kind of opinion on that, which diverges from a lot of fasters. I've done some intermittent fasting. I've cut out carbs, cut out sugar. So I've tried a whole bunch of stuff. And I think today what works and what kind of the diet I'm following is no sugar, no high refined carbs, no meat. And then like really focusing on protein and vegetables, and that's it. And it works really, really well. And also trying not to overeat, because I think the overeating part is also kind of,
It's funny. I do everything you mentioned except the meat part and the overeating part.
I still do the overeating part, because I still love eating. But it's what makes me feel the best.
I want to go back to what you mentioned where you're at McKinsey for a few years. And it seems like it's a safe job, obviously a great company, world-class brand. Why leave? Why leave a quote-unquote safe career to launch into something that you're founding from scratch? And I imagine you probably had people asking you, why are you leaving such a great company?
Yeah, I had. And actually, really interestingly, I've spoken to a few women who were older and who had amazing careers, CEOs of banks and things like that, and who said, geez, just stay at McKinsey for 5 years. It's such an amazing way, to put a stamp on your CV. And I stayed a little bit over 2 years, and I really felt that I had so much to learn when I entered, and I felt like I've learned a lot, and I was ready to apply what I've learned to something more entrepreneurial. I mean, it was almost like not an option to leave and do something on my own. I thought it's what gets me out of bed every morning, is to know that what I'm doing has a real impact on people. And this, vision of making people healthier and happier has always been the driver in my life. And I think, I wanted to create an environment that allows for that and allows more people to be healthier and happier. And so, so I left. I didn't ask myself the question too much. My parents are entrepreneurs, so I feel like they've taken so many risks in their lives that I feel like my risk tolerance is just very high through osmosis, from them. So it wasn't, I always thought to myself, well, if it doesn't work out, I can always go back, or I can always find something else. So that area never really stopped me.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Obviously, you saw it from your parents' side, and from the external point of view, it's like, oh, wow, she's leaving such a great company. But from your perspective, it was the easy choice to make. Was it something I like how you have your mission, your overall mission, your guiding mission is people's wellness and health. Do you find that you always thought it was going to be a company that you're going to found to start to kind of lead you to that? Or was it just through, like you said, learning at McKinsey and learning throughout your career that led you to that eventually?
I don't think that when I was, let's say, in university, I thought of myself as founding I mean, I've toyed with the idea with my parents, but for some reason, though they're entrepreneur, they never really encouraged that. So they were actually much more excited about me going and working at McKinsey than doing something else. And I remember comparing myself to different entrepreneurs and being like, well, do you think I could be like this guy or this person? They were like, no, I think you should just kind of like continue studying and, and do a real job. I don't think they've ever thought of maybe even themselves as doing a real job. I don't know. But so it wasn't something that I was thinking about actively, but subconsciously for sure. It was something that I knew that I wanted to start and create and build.
Yeah. How did the idea for Dialogue come about then? You wanted to start something, how it's tied to something that you care deeply and passionately about.
Yeah.
And we'll get into Dialogue and its growth and the success you've had so far. So curious as to what was the inception?
Yeah. So after I decided to stop my previous company, I had some time on my hands and I was looking for different opportunities. And I was also taking care of my grandmother who was in the last stages of life. So she was going through palliative care and wanted to stay at home as long as possible. And I remember this one morning, where I came to see her and she was sick the whole night, and I called the hospital and I was trying to speak to the doctor, and the nurse on the other side told me, well, you need to bring her to the emergency room so that the doctor can see her. And I remember that morning thinking, geez, like that was early 2016. I was thinking, geez, it's 2016. Like there's gotta be a better way to take care of sick patients. And so when I think about Dialogue's beginning, I think it's a bit of an alignment of stars. I mean, to me, that has always been the motivation and the driver behind wanting to do something in health and wellness. My co-founder, Sharif, was also exiting. So he had a previous startup in the medical space, and he also was looking for his new adventure. So he was always very passionate about improving our healthcare system and making it more accessible. And then the idea of Dialogue fit within the diagram model and thesis. And so that's kind of how it got started. I mean, we all came to this idea from different angles, but at the end of the day, what it ended up being is this, and thankfully we didn't know how complex working in healthcare in Canada is, because I don't think we would have started it. But I think we all have our own deep motivation for doing what it is we're doing and working so hard, and I think it's shown in the growth we've had.
Yeah, it sounds like because you're mission driven, you're able to overcome a bit of that. I don't know if it's the right word, naivety. Yeah. Like, well, if I know like how difficult it is to navigate the system, but your clear mission and your clear objective on what you're trying to achieve kind of overcame that huge obstacle that was in front of you.
Exactly.
And then, so maybe give us a little bit of sense of what is Dialogue today. So maybe explain to what is fundamentally, what do you guys do and how do you contribute to the health sector?
Yeah. So Dialogue is the leading telemedicine company in Canada. Essentially what we do is we offer the opportunity for individuals to connect with medical staff, nurses, nurse practitioners, physicians with any question related to their health or well-being. And we within minutes, they start chatting with a nurse. They can do a video with a nurse and, eventually to get their issue resolved. It is a service that is offered exclusively to businesses. So we're B2B, and it's distributed through large employers and insurers across Canada. It's a service that's pan-Canadian, 24/7, and that has hundreds of thousands of people accessing it, hundreds of consults every day. And what's really nice is that of those consults, I know that there are people who wouldn't have gotten care otherwise and who now, get their issues resolved. And that was the initial purpose when starting it. It was just to help people, and now we're helping hundreds of people every day.
It's such a great mission, and like I mentioned before we started, my wife works in the healthcare sector, and it's the public sector is such a mess, and I find the service you're offering is one that is truly life changing for certain people. And before I dig into like the business side, I want to talk about maybe what's your a story, not necessarily most proud of, but one that you the most recent one that you can think of like, hey, this happened because of what we did, what we created?
So typically we don't share stories because it's confidential, and I don't even know the details of any of the stories because I don't have access to anything. However, we sometimes have patients who write us testimonials, and those are the ones who accept that we speak, about their stories. So we've had, one which was a mother with a baby that presented on the platform, and the baby didn't talk yet, but she was trying to describe the symptoms, and that mother spent some time with a nurse and a physician, and then they said, you know what, it sounds like it may be a brain tumor. So go to the emergency room. Here's what you need to explain when you get there. And obviously not something we treated on the platform, but we provided all this advice and, said to her, you need to go. And so next day we follow up with this person, and her baby was getting operated for a brain tumor.
Wow.
Yeah. So, that's just one. Another one was this, woman who got bitten by a cat and who went to the emergency room, didn't get the right prescription, contacted us, and we, assessed her via photos and video. And we said to her, you need to go back to the emergency room. We've sent her a prescription in the meantime to her pharmacy. And when she went back to the emergency room, spoke to a different doctor, he said, well, if you wouldn't have come today, you would have lost your hand. So, and it's different. We have people with mental health issues. We have people with pain. We have people going through divorce who seek help and support. Just any, different examples from different walks of life. And I think, that's what's really, really unique, is that we're able to help on, emergent matters, and not urgent matters, but the service offers help, to those who need it in a way that's otherwise could be, inaccessible.
Yeah, no, it's pretty astonishing. And I find, like I mentioned, I find the service, obviously, what you guys are building is truly a world-class kind of idea. Maybe gives a sense of the growth since you founded, like numbers that you can share.
Yeah. So we were, three, I don't want to say in a garage, but we're three in a co-working space, early 2016.
Worked in a co-working space. A garage could be better sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. So it was a co-working space with a lot of coffee machine sounds in the background, especially when we're doing our MVP and testing with patients, not with obviously clients, but just when we were starting and there's coffee machines in the background. So we grown to, we're almost, over 120 full-time employees, double that for medical staff, pan-Canadian, 24/7, several hundreds of clients are offering this. Like I said, several hundreds of consults every day,
And how big do you think the opportunity is? How big, I'm sure like in your next conversation with venture capital, let's say, as you want to grow for the next round, is your vision to build something that's global? Is it something dominating in Canada, but with, let's say, deeper services and fully integrating, like for integrating down the value chain? So curious as to where do you see the opportunity?
Yeah, so both. We get a lot of clients coming up to us saying, hey, our employees love Dialogue and we have this additional need, for example, mental health, and our disability claims are rising, primarily driven by people going on burnout leave and stuff like that. What can you guys do? And so that's where we've, developed our second complementary program specifically in mental health. And so we see several niches like that where we can expand into and help employers and employees, be more productive, better at work, not question their wellness at work through what we offer. And of course, expanding internationally.
Amazing. And do you know which markets already, or is it too soon?
We're looking at a few markets right now. Nothing that we've announced publicly, but testing a few markets.
Okay, very cool. I want to go back to you mentioned the medical staff. Mm-hmm. I imagine that's probably the part of the flywheel that's the most difficult to generate, right?
Yeah.
how did you get to get nurses, doctors to get on the platform? And then also, how does it work? Do they have to do this on their own time? Is this part of like their existing jobs? I'm very curious as to how the model works.
Yeah. So at the beginning, I mean, we had to be very, very creative. We recruited recruit engineers. We would go on LinkedIn and, we started there, and then we realized that not all doctors and nurses have LinkedIn profiles. So then we went into, Facebook groups, and we went into different organizations, journals that both nurses, nurse practitioners, and physicians read. So, we had to be very, very creative. I mean, we have some really strong medical staff on board. And so, high quality physicians attract other high quality physicians. So when we have a very rigorous and rigid kind of vetting process, I'm trying to pull up the stats, but it's 1 in 25 interviews go through or something like that. Yeah. I don't have the exact number. But we're very, very selective in that regard. Some people work with us full time. Others are complementing, especially physicians in a lot of cases are complementing their hours with Dialogue. So they would, let's say, work, in an X number of hours, and then they would say, on the weekend, I want to do a few hours here and there.
But do they have to tell their employer? Do they have to tell the government that hires them, or is this on their own time? How does that work?
No. So telemedicine, especially in Quebec, is not a reimbursed service. I mean, it's everywhere in Canada. It's not a reimbursed service other than in British Columbia. And so there's no fee code. So that means that when a physician does the act of providing care via telemedicine, the government cannot pay for it. And so that's where, we pay directly the physician. And so we pay the physician for the work that they do.
But there's no conflict that the government's like, hey, you can't do this because it's not accredited or we don't pay for it.
No.
If the doctor wants to work Saturday all day doing this, then it's his prerogative.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And what's really nice as well is that it allows a lot of physicians who wouldn't have otherwise worked more to work. So for example, and I think it's really interesting because it optimizes, utilization. But if you think about, let's say, a physician who goes on mat leave and she is not going back for 9 months because she's with her baby, she doesn't want to interact with sick patients and thus give that to her child. Well, she can work on Dialogue and there's no risk of getting infected, right? So she can start doing a few hours a week, a few weeks after the baby's born because she wants to maintain her practice and skills. Retiring physicians who want to continue practicing, but practice a little bit less. So it's really interesting how telemedicine can complement the current schedules of physicians.
Yeah. I'm going to use a really businessy term to describe this. I can't think of another term that comes to mind, but it's like you're almost capitalizing on distressed inventory, right? Like if the plane leaves, well, it's like hours, receipts that can't be used. But here it's like, like you mentioned the example of the mom that's just now recently on mat leave. Well, it's like for sure she maybe wants to do this and also beneficial for her.
Yeah.
Or like you said, the physician that just retired that, I can work maybe, let's say 10, 15, 20 hours a week.
Exactly.
It's a very interesting one. And then on the reverse side, so in terms of the other side of the marketplace, it's businesses, right? So large companies like I won't mention some companies that are on your website, but so a large company that wants to offer this for their employees, for all the reasons that you mentioned before, right? So do they pay you on a per employee basis?
Yeah, per employee per month basis. Yeah.
Okay, so it's a flat fee. There's no usage in essence. Like if an employee calls 5 times or 20 times, that doesn't change.
Typically not. We operate the same way as an insurance model. So, it's a low per employee per month fee. And, we know that utilization will be between X and Y. And then if it exceeds dramatically, which we have sometimes, then we have a discussion on pricing or utilization.
Given the reality with insurance, is there any wiggle room when it comes to innovating on the business model? Can you try other types of business models or given insurance and how the model works? You're set in this model and that's the one that you're going to use to grow and scale.
Oh, there's several models. There's the B2C model. So we could make this platform available to anyone in Canada who just wants to access a physician. We could say, forget clinical operations. We just have a tech platform that we use to connect other clinics. There's many different models. We could pay on a per use basis. But typically, so there are many models, and we've explored several.
I was saying with the B2C one sounds interesting, just because there's obviously a sexiness factor of it. Like, someone might be willing to pay the $10 or $20, whatever it is, a month to have that real time access. Is it something you've seriously considered? Is it something maybe in the future, or
maybe in the future? Yeah, we have considered it, but for us, I mean, we're a company that likes to focus, and we decided to focus on B2B because we develop tools around it to inform employees about it and make sure it's top of mind. And when they get sick, that they use it. So, we kind of said, look, we're going to go after specific populations being employees of certain companies. And then we're going to make sure we do everything so that them, the employees and their family members access, the platform when they need to.
Yeah. I like that the idea of focus, right? So it's like given your size and given your growth, it makes sense to double down on what you're doing.
Exactly.
Considering your rapid growth, and I'm curious as to, like, I imagine, when you launched it, you always wanted to focus on something that was going to grow, was going to have a bigger impact than just you and your founders. What was the one thing that was the most unexpected given your high growth? I imagine that, hey, we have to hire people and like things are broken all the time and like we have to constantly reorganize. But what is maybe the thing that you didn't know about a high growth environment that you realize today?
Oh my gosh. So many things. I think one of the surprising elements is I think it's easy for founders to be mission driven. But when it trickles down to almost every single employee in the company, it's really nice. Just seeing how people are dedicated, or the types of stories that they share, or, when they go the extra mile because they truly, really care is really nice. When, I mean, we've scaled from 0 to, to call it 200 right now. So it's not, we're not 10,000, but it's still quite impressive to see, everyone from every ranks holding this mission deeply in their hearts. So that would be one, I would say. I think, the fact that in the industry we're in, it doesn't get easier with scale. It gets more complicated. So, we're 3 years in and it's still complex. It's still a complex industry. It's still a regulated industry. We can't just do whatever we want. We have licensed professionals working with us. So it's challenging. It's complex.
Yeah. I can imagine as you scale, you also have people that work on some of these harder partnerships and channels, like with the governments and with regulators, with insurers. I imagine that'll help, but it won't, like you said, it won't necessarily get easier, but
exactly.
But you have smart people hopefully helping you.
Yeah.
What do you think, maybe to switch about like your view on the industry and where you see it going? I find it's still so early days. Like we launched in 2016, right? Like it feels like you said, it's like, why doesn't the service exist? So I love that as a premise of like, this should just exist in the world, and it does today, but it's still so nascent, right?
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of healthcare in the workplace, or more generally? Because it sounds like you have opportunities beyond just the workplace.
Oh, I think there's going to be so many interesting convergences of trends. I think healthcare is going to become more and more personalized. I think the notion of family doctor, in the way it used to be, hundreds of years ago, when the doctor would come to your family and know your whole family from, birth to kind of end of life, and would follow you throughout. I think it's going to come back. I think now we go to clinics or hospitals and everything is kind of revolving around the doctor. I think that notion is going to change back to revolve around the patient. And, through automation, through machine intelligence, humans who are going to make decisions on patients will have a much better 360 view and be able to make better decisions. So I think there's going to be a lot of machine intelligence and automation which will come and help that. A lot of people, so there's obviously digitalization happening in the space. A lot of people are tackling different problems. And I think eventually this will also converge. So for example, you have, a Fitbit that collects, data on your weight and number of steps and sleep. And then you have another company that deals with, trying to bring together all of your medical records. And then you have a company like Dialogue that gives you access to physicians. And then you have another company that specializes in chronic disease management. But you can imagine that eventually these different services are going to converge and integrate through different APIs in order to offer a one-stop shop where a patient will be able to access these different parameters, where care will become not reactive, but proactive.
Yeah, I was going to say, where you guys sit is, it's funny because you mentioned the idea about like the APIs and connecting these devices. Like it came up in my mind as well as you were talking, and it feels like you guys are sitting in the right place because you control both sides, right? You can control the demand of users, aka patients that are looking for health, and also the most important part, which is the actual healthcare practitioners,
right?
So you can, like you mentioned, like the idea of like the Fitbit or the Apple Watch plugging into your system and then giving that data.
Yeah.
So it creates immensely valuable platform, right? So you could truly be a platform.
Exactly.
For medical care. So it's a pretty interesting vision.
Yeah. And I think, and I think this idea of being more predictive is also very interesting, because all of a sudden, you're no longer saying, oh, this person showed up and let me help them with their problem, but it's to say, okay, I understand where you are in your life. I understand your patterns and your lifestyle. And I'm able to predict that you need this type of care today to live better, healthier, not get sick, whatever. And I think that part is also very, very exciting.
Yeah. Are there any particular technologies that you guys are looking at, like in a shorter time horizon that you're experimenting with?
Oh, I mean, many of those. I think many of those. I think nobody is truly predictive today, and I think a lot of people are tackling the issue from different angles. But yes, I mean, we're as part of our roadmap development, we're testing a lot of these.
What do you think is happening in the space that for you is maybe underappreciated, that maybe doesn't get enough attention, particularly when it comes to healthcare?
It's a good question that doesn't get enough attention. I think everything that has to do... So I think the big issues in healthcare today is everything that's chronic, mental health specifically. I think there's a lot of people that give it attention. I think we haven't solved it yet. I think we haven't cracked how do we curb anxiety and depression levels. So if I may turn your question kind of a little bit around and not answer it directly, I do think that there are certain areas, in healthcare that, like, we haven't cracked it yet. I'm thinking about mental health. I'm thinking about diabetes. I'm thinking about cancer. I don't know whether our approach today is the right one to actually make a difference on a large scale in the long term.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. And you touched upon mental health a few times. It's one that's touched me personally, both my family and very close friends. And it's one I feel there's still a bit of a stigma. I find
a big stigma attached, absolutely.
Which is like, I think it's just like any other health issue, but I think it's so misunderstood.
Yeah.
That it creates this, like I said, it needs to be demystified to a certain extent. And so I agree with you. If there's any big leaps to be had, is really understanding the mental health and the brain, how it functions to help people. So I'm happy when you said that you guys do tackle that from a workplace perspective. I'm already thinking about it, for my team. It's like, man, it'd be beneficial to at least offer that as an outlet, because the work can be stressful and people don't always consider themselves like putting that as a priority. So giving that option, even today, if you do it like from a based on your existing model, it's not predictive yet. It's not solving everything. I think it's hugely beneficial. So I applaud you for that.
Yeah.
And I could probably go on for hours, Anna, and I want to be respectful of your time. Maybe one last parting question, because we've dug into so much. I find it's a very interesting conversation so far. As maybe just where can people find more information about what you guys are doing, read about your mission, and anything else you want to ask from the audience?
Sure. Dialogue.co. That's like.com, but without the M.
Working on the .com, I imagine.
Yeah, no, it's dialogue.co. Yeah. That's where, that's our website. That's where jobs are posted. We're also on LinkedIn and Facebook. Facebook is where we share a lot of the resources, and Twitter as well. And then, LinkedIn and our main website is the kind of where we have the jobs. I know, my personal kind of, wish is to attract the most amazing people to work on this mission, because it takes a lot of very resilient, courageous people to crack this. So, I think, we're always looking for amazing people, and, connect with us there, and we'll be responding quickly.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your time, Anna. And I'm really looking forward to signing up myself when it becomes an open platform for the public. In the meantime, continued success.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Point of No Return podcast. Never miss an episode by clicking on the subscribe button on iTunes or Google Play.